Our last but definitely not least speaker is Travis Opasensky, who is joining us from Atlanta to present a paper entitled Towards a Circular Economy of Aid, a proposal to use circular principles in disaster relief. Travis is the founder and executive director of Wright Boot, a US nonprofit based in Atlanta, Georgia. Wright Boot works with disaster relief organizations to redirect, repurpose, and recycle disruptive donations and material waste. So Travis, thank you for joining us today, and over to you.
Thank you so very much, Kai. Maybe on the outset, this might seem like a bit of a departure from the content of our previous presenters, but hopefully I've been able to present this in a way that we'll be able to see how directly that waste management and plastic waste is connected and it part of this system of global aid that we need to decolonize and dismantle. Today, I guess I would like to talk to you about that particular issue and offer some of my solutions that we've started coming up with today. Oops, where's my? There we go. So communities and people affected by crisis are not negatively affected and are more prepared, resilient, and less at risk as a result of humanitarian action. And this is the ideal, right? Together with the rest of the core humanitarian standards, it represents the intent of most helpers and good Samaritans of our world. It's our do no harm, as it were. Intent can be a noble thing, but we're responsible for both our intent and our impact. And helping may not look like what we think it does. So in 2015, Tropical Cyclone Pam hit Vanuatu, impacting over 171,000 people and causing catastrophic damage. This much you probably already know, particularly my colleagues in the South Pacific region. What happened afterwards highlights a major failing of the global humanitarian system and the focus of this discussion. After Pam, donations started pouring in from all over the world. 70, 20, and 40-foot shipping containers of those donations were what we call unsolicited bilateral donations, or UBDs. UBDs are goods that spontaneously arrive after a disaster. They arrive unannounced or with very short notice. They have incomplete or faulty paperwork. They lack a clearly defined consignee. They have incorrect packaging, or they're inappropriate for the location and the cultural context, or any combination of these. UBDs have a very dramatic effect on the logistical, financial, environmental, and public health aspects of recovery from a disaster. In the case of Tropical Cyclone Pam, what happened to these UBDs is the same thing that happens the world over. After 10 months, 18 of those containers remained at the port, racking up over 1.5 million US dollars in demurrage fees. And then 1 year after Pam, the government of Vanuatu had no choice but to release the unusable donations for disposal, resulting in literal tons of expired food, clothing, and other goods being sent to landfill. And Vanuatu was not an isolated incident. The Boxing Day tsunami in 2004 in Indonesia, the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, the flooding in Serbia in 2014, it's safe to say that nearly every disaster has examples of inappropriate and harmful donations. One study even goes so far as to say that between 50 and 70% of donated goods headed to recovery zones are not useful and create major complications for the relief effort. And it's not just the donations itself that go to waste. Water bottles, tarpaulins, plastic packaging, and other intrinsic elements of disaster relief add to the burden of responsibility placed on relief workers and eventually the people recovering from disaster. If we take a look at the picture of the pallets of water bottles donated to Texas this past February after their big freeze and ask who is responsible for the bottles once they're empty, suddenly after combining the UBDs, packaging, and other materials we throw away without thinking in our daily lives, our noble intent of helping is offset by a significant negative impact. This is an approximation of the life cycle of donations that are made to any given disaster relief effort. It follows very closely the linear model of consumption that is pervasive in the global north. We take a thing, we use the thing, and we throw the thing away. The problem of waste in disaster relief starts when the helpers, the governments, international bodies, and large scale aid organizations, mainly those who make the policy, project that model onto the way we provide relief. Now, in this case, we make a thing and it enters the domain of aid and disaster relief when we ask, can this be donated? If the answer is yes, then it moves on to active relief and recovery efforts. Then we ask, can this be helpful? Even if we answer yes to both questions, the likelihood of that product still ending up in landfill is very high, especially considering that 90% of the plastic waste in the US and Canada ends up in landfills. When that product is donated or used for disaster relief, that product ends up in a place with already strained and damaged logistics to get it to a landfill there, or maybe no landfill at all. And what happens when we answer no at either of those junctures? The big INGOs will just say no to donations that they deem unusable. And maybe that's less than fair, but at least understandable from their perspective. But isn't it just a little bit reductive? What happens to the kindness in a donation of clothes made by someone just trying to help? What happens to the potential of an item to help when it doesn't meet the narrow requirements of a large INGO at a narrow point in time? Maybe all of the waste doesn't just go into the landfill. So in stark contrast to the linear model, no pun intended, circular economy runs on three basic principles: design out waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use, and regenerate natural systems. Everything is used continuously and all the materials remain within the system as much as possible. We don't use more than we make, and we sustain and regenerate the natural environment. In a more direct sense, the image on the right shows a circular life cycle for plastics and packaging, bringing us a little bit closer to looking at circularity in terms of disaster relief and humanitarian aid. Instead of purchasing a product in a commercial sense and using it in a commercial sense, recovering the value of that material and returning it back to manufacturing for another go around, we can conceptualize a circular aid economy where anything used in disaster relief is designed to leave zero waste and do no harm. And it's surrounded by mechanisms built to circulate that material and value. And it helps to regenerate not only the natural environment, but restore the health, safety, and dignity to the affected community. And so to that end, I offer that when we talk about recovering value from the goods donated to and involved in disaster relief, we should view that value in a more holistic sense. If a community gathers together a donation of clothes and shoes and sends them care of Red Cross, which often happens in diaspora communities, having their communities affected by disaster, they end up stuck in a container or eventually thrown out. There's more than just the monetary or material value being wasted. The potential value to relief efforts, just not at the time or context in which they were sent, is wasted. And the value of the kindness, the pureness of human spirit that is inherent in those donations, even if a product is carefully chosen by humanitarian professionals to assist in recovery efforts, gets wasted. When the value wasted is viewed in those terms, it becomes much more urgent that we apply circular practices to all aspects of humanitarian aid and disaster relief, and round the corner of that dated and wasteful linear model. So there are many different people and organizations out there, big and small, making inroads into the environmental impact of disaster relief, and every single one is important. And it's unfortunate that I can't celebrate them all here. This is what we're doing at Wright Boot. At Wright Boot, we want simultaneous multi-level interventions to recover all that value and to maximize the impact of donations with the goal of eliminating UBDs and waste in disaster relief. And we work with disaster relief organizations, like we said earlier, to redirect, repurpose, and recycle disruptive materials. Firstly, we want to redirect incoming offers that don't have immediate use to programs in the donor's area. Rather than discouraging people motivated to donate, we can help them create local recycling programs and send that recovered monetary value as cash, increasing the potential value to relief efforts and maintaining the spirit of kindness of that gift. This has been pretty effective here in the United States, at least in our local Atlanta area with churches and faith communities. We've held singular recycling events here in Atlanta with local churches and the local material recovery facilities, with the goal of educating frequent donors in that community about the environmental impact of improper donations, and then directing the funds towards community organizations that are providing COVID relief. Secondly, we want to repurpose goods to do good. Imagine those tons of clothes that in Vanuatu that went to waste. We'd like to connect those materials with a vibrant pre-existing global network of upcyclers and consumer product manufacturers that are looking for this post-consumer material so the new items can be sold and provide revenue for local recovery. There are plenty of, the obvious example of this would be the Nikes and Patagonias of the world who are constantly, and even Hewlett Packard, the computer manufacturer, who are actively sourcing high impact, reusable post-consumer goods. And this is a very valuable and important source of these. It's both valuable both to the companies and to the relief aspect. And finally, recycling can help alleviate the inevitable UBDs that will reach a disaster zone. No matter how good the messaging, nor how catchy and viral the social media campaign, waste from those donations and relief efforts still needs to be dealt with on the ground. Recycling those materials that are already on site removes the burden from responders and the community, and when possible, provides cash to be put right back into the local economy. And this aspect has been a little tricky during COVID, but getting our start right before a global pandemic, but we're looking forward and building partnerships and looking to secure the funding necessary to make a big impact this coming year, especially with the US hurricane season just right around the corner. So why do we want to do it this way? A couple of reasons. We want to support local solutions, local recovery, and the local environment. Particularly in the case of waste management in this scenario, the destructive impact of waste has an inverse relationship with the economic and logistical capabilities of a community. These donations are doing more damage to the most vulnerable and impacted communities. If recovering the holistic value of the UBDs and other waste, and specifically returning those resources to local organizations on the ground, is key to giving those organizations and communities the best chance to succeed. I think of it as Wright Boot's way of saying, I know I don't know what you need, but let me remove barriers for you and then give you the resources so you can succeed in your way. On a more macro level, we believe that part of our mission and purpose is to participate in removing the responsibility to deal with donations and disaster relief goods at the end of their usefulness from the consumer, which in this case is the community recovering from disaster, and facilitate putting it back onto the producer, or in this case, the government, INGO, responder, etc. It is fundamentally unfair to those we claim to help to make them deal with our garbage. And we're also firm in our belief that the markets are ready for the blurring of these lines and the breaking of the silos between for-profit materials recycling and disaster relief. Recycled plastic meets only 6% of the demand for common plastics, at least in the US and Canada. And the global waste recycling services market was valued at over $53 billion US in 2019, is expected to grow at 5% the next 7 years. What Wright Boot is aiming to do in that aspect is to be the handshake between this pool of resources and the communities recovering from disaster. If we can join the two worlds of sustainability and disaster relief, then maybe we can do both better, so both people and planet can thrive. And of course, we refuse to let kindness go to waste. That's been my presentation. I went a little bit under, so that's good. Feel free, if you'd like to reach me, please send an email or visit our website. And I'm looking forward to continuing this discussion, hopefully in the future with many of you.